Hello everyone, my name is Paul Mourino. Thank you to the council for some time tonight. I'm running for Congress here in this district in the Republican primary in the next couple of months. And I came down to speak before the council tonight to introduce a few of the ideas that I've been developing with the campaign to you, to ask for your support, interest, or help in shaping what will become the next congressional election later in the year. I would like you to support my candidacy or to dialogue with me and figure out if what I'm addressing is viable to your situation. I am running because I feel that we are in the middle of a major economic crisis, and we have very few politicians at the national level who are addressing this squarely. So I would like to spend some moments tonight to describe the solutions and the way out. And then the job creation program that we need to have, and then beyond that, where we might go into the future. So first things first. What are we in the middle of? The entire banking system is broken, busted beyond repair, and the reason is it is lawless. We used to have very precise standards that govern the banking system from 1933 with the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt up until the last 20 years. At some point in time, maybe in the early 80s, late 90s, it was decided in the powers that be, in the halls of power there in Washington, to shut down and remove laws like the Glass-Steagal Act, which is a center point of my campaign. The removal of this law led to the collapse of everything in 2007 and 2008. So therefore, I am campaigning to make this law once again, hopefully tomorrow, the next day, as soon as humanly possible. What is the Glass-Steagal Act? Well, it was decided it was wise and prudent to separate the banking system many years ago, with the idea being that the investment banking community would be separated from the commercial banking system. And the idea was that your monies, whether it was savings, investments, loans, maybe you have a small business account, other things of that nature, would be housed in the commercial system. And there are very precise laws by which your banker at that commercial bank could handle and invest those monies. If they wanted to gamble, God forbid they had drug money, they wanted to speculate, that was for the sole purpose of investment banking. Well, this law was working fine and dandy until 1999 when it was signed out of law and replaced with what? The desire to gamble. Now, unfortunately, in our district, our current incumbent, his name is Congressman Israel. He refuses to co-sign the legislation. So I'm saying that we should make representative government represent us. And that is, convince the congressman to either change his mind or will change him with someone who will ram this thing through as soon as humanly possible. Okay, what does this do? It begins to return the banking system to some degree of sanity. In FDR's time, it took 7 days. Why can't we redo that? All right, maybe we can take 2 weeks, but let's have that happen tomorrow. Okay, jobs, jobs, jobs. How are we going to create jobs? Once this goes through, we then have to discuss what we're going to build. Now, we might be interested in returning to the space program of NASA, Kennedy's idea, going back to the moon. For those of you who have some experience on the island, you probably remember Grumman, and what Grumman and the aerospace sector was for the island economically. Well, Grumman was removed a couple of years ago, and, well, what has happened since then? The character of the economy has changed. My view is we have to recreate that, maybe not exactly, but with high technology and a new orientation, in this case, towards developing the moon. Secondarily, power, oil, nuclear power, atomic power. I know a lot of people are scared about atomic power. This is why we shut down the reactor up in Shoreham. In my view, that was a mistake. I think that it should be reopened. Now, we may have to demolish the whole thing and rebuild it from scratch, so be it. We have it demands a lot of jobs, a lot of high-skilled engineers, a lot of folks in the Navy, I presume, will be happy to help with those things, because guess what? Most of our Navy, our surface fleet, is run by atomic power. So, beyond that, the other element of the campaign is constitutional law. Does the Constitution matter? Of course it does. Does it matter to our president? I don't think so. So what I'm campaigning for, if necessary, to introduce an article of impeachment, if need be the case, come November. Now, why is this? What are the reasons for impeachment? Well, it's a long list. Most recently is the interference of the church and state. In other words, the healthcare policy, the mandate, is demanding that the church that provides, like Catholic hospitals and other things, they provide some degree of medical care to the general population, which is not just Catholics, it's the whole citizenry. The current policy demands that they provide certain things that are contrary to the religious tenets of the Catholic Church. So the administration is demanding that the Catholic Church change certain policies or they will be fined. Not a very good idea. Beyond that, the war in Libya, unconstitutional. And the list goes on and on. My website details more of this. The way NASA was defunded, again, unconstitutional. The money was already appropriated. So it's a controversial thing, but I suggest that we take it up. Now, where we are at the moment is several months away from a primary campaign in April. The Republican Party in this district has endorsed Steve LeBate, and you're free to vote or help him if you like. I am campaigning and presenting these ideas before you because I think that we can be much more specific in our choice and policy as we go forward. I know taxes are bad. I know increases in medical costs are bad. But the only way to solve those things is the Glass-Steagal Act. The only way to solve them is to reorganize the banking system. If that doesn't happen, nothing good will happen, period. It's that simple. So the next couple of months, I have been canvassing the district. I'm recruiting volunteers, young and old, to help petitioning come April 1. And then there will be a primary, was it June or so, and then the Republican Party will choose its nominee. So you are more than welcome to participate. Every Wednesday, I've recruited a number of students already who are most interested in the banking and economic question. And in that regard, we've been studying the ideas of Franklin Roosevelt, Lincoln, as they all go back to Alexander Hamilton, which, just as it turns out, he solved these things 200 years ago. So I offer these things to you, and if you have any questions, and there's time for them, I'd be happy to take the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Thank you for your views.
Okay. Yes?
I have no idea who you are, where you came from.
Okay.
Could you give us your background?
Sure.
And
Sure.
have you been in politics?
I've never run personally myself. I'm from West Sayville. I've lived in Washington, D.C. I went to school at Sayville High School. I went to Villanova University. I ran a couple of different campaigns. I ran Mr. LaRouche's presidential campaign in 2004. I helped to run a congressional campaign in Texas to save NASA 2.5 years ago. Unfortunately, we were not successful in saving the space program, which is why it's pretty much removed. My background is pretty much the study of business and economics. And at college, I was oriented towards moving into the business sector. I worked at EAB Bank for a couple of summers in vehicle leasing and those kinds of things. And I decided not to pursue credentials in banking because I saw the writing on the wall in 2000. It was clear to me then that we were teaching people my age to gamble. I mean, when you're being trained to sell a retired person an inflated mortgage from what it was at $150,000 for a mortgage to $500,000, in my mind that's immoral. But this was what was being taught. And so I ended up in government policy campaigns attempting to try to address these things through the vehicle of a presidential campaign and other things in Washington that entail talking to your congressman, Mr. Israel, other members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, asking them, hey, look, we are gambling away our future here with what's happening in the banking system. And unfortunately, many of them decided to look the other way. Say, well, it's not that bad. Well, so I've lived in Long Island all my life, except for the last 10 years. I lived for a period in Philadelphia, went to school, Washington, D.C., and Texas. And I recently moved back here from Texas. And if you'd like more on my website, my work history and all that, is there. And if you want to grill me, my number is there too.
How old are you?
I'm 33.
33.
Yes.
What year did you graduate?
2001. Oh, high school 97. 1997.
And you were always a resident of Sayville?
Up until 2001, yes. And I moved back here in the last half year.
You favor nuclear development. It looks like you've
Yes,
had
ma'am.
interest previously. Tell me about that. Ask about that.
Well, power. It tends to be the bottleneck of any economy. What you do for fuel tends to determine what you can do physically. And for about 100 years or so, we've been operating on chemical combustion. And coming out of World War II, we discovered, this interesting thing called atomic power. And Eisenhower, when he was president, had outlined a whole plan to build power systems for generation and distribution, and then recycling systems to deal with the waste. His idea was, in the coming post-war period, we'd be replacing oil as a main source of power with the next source of more powerful, what's called energy flux density. In other words, you can do a lot more with a lot less material. But then beyond that, the technological applications are vast. You're dealing with isotopes that have applications in all kinds of things, whether it's the medical field, materials production like textiles. It's very vast. Unfortunately, with the space program and the Vietnam War, these things came to a head, as far as I understand, in the late 60s, and there was a cultural paradigm shift whereby technology was demonized. And you have an environmentalist idea take over, where we're not going to pursue the frontier of science or the frontier of space like we were under Kennedy's idea earlier. And so nuclear power suffered that fate. And from what I understand here on the island, there's a lot of brouhaha and passions flying around the Shoreham plant, which was completed, running, and then they shut it down after completing it. In my view, that's a little silly. The amount of training, resources, investment that you put into such a thing is gargantuan. It's like a 20-year process. Now, granted, there may have been problems with the labor and the skill and so on, but I think those are things that we can address if we had qualified leadership. And there are parts of the economy that are running on nuclear power, particularly in the military, because it's so effective. And I think that we ought to choose it again. Why? Because, well, look at our constraints right now. We have a planet of 7 billion people. How are we going to produce the material, the food, the high living standard that all these people demand? Well, if we choose the next most powerful resource, fission, fusion, or beyond, I think that we'll be best prepared to provide for those things. Granted, our citizens in the 2nd Congressional District are not going to provide all of this for all 7 billion people, but we'll lead the way. And it obviously should be a national discussion. We haven't really built a new plant in like 20 years, 30 years. There was something recently in the press that they're now going to build one in South Carolina or North Carolina, I had read recently. But we really are behind the times when it comes to high technology goods production. And then beyond that, our machining base, our industry is gone. How are we going to get that back? We're not going to do it exactly like it was yesterday. So my thinking is, well, why don't we look at our history as a country? We tend to prosper the best when we choose a frontier. In former times, it was geographic or maybe cultural. Well, space is there. That's a frontier. If we're going to be serious about moving around in space with more people, chemical rockets aren't going to cut it. Just because you have to carry so much fuel around, and you're limited in how far you can go, how quickly. So those are some of my general thoughts. I've written more on the website on it, but is that kind of what you wanted to hear or interested in knowing?
Yes, that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, there's more on the website. Please look at it. And if there's any questions, by all means, email me. Just one follow-up with the Shoreham thing. I have contacted a firm out in Idaho, AEHI, Alternative Energy Holdings International. They're building some exciting plants there and also very involved in the thorium cycle in India. They would like to build more of those plants here, but for political and cultural problems. Most of these people founded this company. They're retired American civil engineers or Navy personnel who put the company together about 5 years ago because they didn't want to see nuclear power go the way of the dinosaur in the United States. So I've contacted them for all of your benefits with the campaign to see if they would be interested in analyzing, is it viable here on the island? Or what should be done with what we have here in New York State? Because as we build up, say for example, we decide to improve the railroad system and go to maglev trains, the power consumption will jump exponentially. So that means we'll have to improve our fuel and energy supplies accordingly. So that's underway. Yes?
I'm delighted that you're interested in the space program. I'd like to hear your platform on the starving children in the United States alone. What will you do to help solve that problem?
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
I'd like to address it as best. I know I'm running in the Republican primary, but I think FDR's administration has some very good examples we can follow. Forestry, conservation, basic works programs to build up the skill sets of a lot of our young people who are pretty much thrown off out of the system. They're jobless, they're playing video games, they're not really given an orientation to work productively in society. Now, some of these things might be short-lived in that, all of FDR's programs didn't last forever, but perhaps there are many applications for those things. There's another program I'm interested that Kennedy had presented. It's called the North American Water and Power Alliance. In 63, 64, he was interested in bringing down about 20% of the water in Alaska. These are the Yukon and the McKinsey River systems. They flow north into the Arctic. His interest was to address the water problem that they saw in the country then, by diverting about 30% of the water south to irrigate the west. And that means you'd be pretty much terraforming the whole Rocky Mountain Trench, building dams, pumping systems, navigation systems, to then distribute that water as you bring it south to Idaho, through the Rocky Mountain Gorges, to the coast, California, Oregon, Washington, and the Midwest. That requires a lot of engineers, a lot of laborers, high-skilled labor at some point as well. So my interest would be to get all these inner-city youth who are qualifiable, or we can qualify them over time, in a productive work program of that size and scale. Granted, it's huge. The dams they were looking at are 10 times bigger than those of the Boulder Dam. That's never been done before. Okay, maybe that's the kind of scale we have to talk about to deal with the problems our young people are dealing with. That is, a lot of them, not all of them, don't care. They're kind of tuned out. We have to address them by challenging their imagination. Oh, you don't think you can build this? You don't think you're skilled? Well, why don't we help you? The Army Corps of Engineers, I'm sure, will play a very important role in helping define some of those paths. So in Congress, if I'm to represent you, I'm going to have to do a lot of work to recruit other members of Congress who I'm sure will be interested, but may not have the cojones, if you would, to lead on such a program. So that's the way I would begin. I'm sure there's other applications as well, but that's where I'd start. Oh, and then with the campaign, I'm trying to recruit some of these young people. It's very difficult to exercise the First Amendment on some of our universities, even though they get taxpayer money. You have to go through a lot of jumping and hoops in the bureaucracy, I know. So nonetheless, I'm there trying to recruit them to our weekly readings of Hamilton every Wednesday night. Those that are interested. Not all of them are interested right away, but that's what the website is for. Some of them, who don't come in person, they'll read it. And I hope that will help with petitioning in a general way, and then beyond that, we'll see what they want to do with the campaign. Really, it's their vehicle. You know, it's not really about me, it's about the process. Personally, I would have already volunteered with someone else, but for the lack of quality in some of the other candidates. If some of the other candidates take up what I'm saying, wonderful. Then I can worry about other things. But at the moment, I feel that the Glass-Steagal Act is so important, and some of these things we're discussing about nuclear power, employment are so important that I have to take time to present it, because I don't think it's going to be presented otherwise. A lot of people out there would rather talk about or complain about taxes, taxes, I'm going to pay tax. Yes, we know. I know, I hear you. But young people are not going to be attracted to a campaign about complaining, right? They want a future. They're young, they're thinking about the future, they know they don't have one. So how should we address them? Well, I think we should address them by challenging them this way.
I think that's a great idea.
Super.
So you echo a lot of sentiments from the 30s when I see you mentioned FDR a couple of times.
Yes.
Did you know that FDR is actually here tonight?
He is?
Rich
God bless him. Where have you been?
was FDR in CM's production of Annie.
Really?
That my daughter played Molly in.
Sir, may I shake your hand?
So
Thank you.
now you can say that you met FDR.
That's good.
Wonderful. We need you in Washington, my friend.
Could we do a follow-up another time where you actually came back and discussed this in more detail?
I'd be happy
This
to.
was great to whet our appetites.
Thank you.
And you're very well spoken.
Thank you. I'd be happy to.
Very much
I'd be happy to.
Hope you win. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Okay, thank you.